Hey guys, Jim Edwards here along with,
Stu Smith.
and welcome to episode 8.
Yes.
Episode 8
Yes.
of the Sales Copywriting and Content Marketing podcast with Jim Edwards and Stu Smith. I am, of course, Stu Smith, and that's Jim Edwards over there. And so today what are we talking about today, Stu?
We're going to talk about stories.
We are going to talk about stories and what precipitated this episode. Why are we talking about stories?
Well, remember we had a, what was it?
I think somebody asked a question.
Yeah, it was on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
And I think you had talked about something about your story. Remember how when you tell something on video, it has to have emotion, it has to be all that. And then someone made a comment like, I'd really like to hear your story.
Right.
And I made a comment. It's a great one. In fact, that's our next episode.
Okay.
We're here Jim's story. So there's a bunch of different stories. Obviously, I have a great story for today that has nothing to do with how I got here. But I think most of the time people want to know how you got to where you are today.
Right.
That's the story. And
even then there are dozens or even hundreds of stories. There are different lengths of stories. There are different details that you can give in the story. There are different things, meanings that you can, or morals that people can pull from the stories. You can tell a story one way and it has one moral. You can tell the same story a different way and draw out another moral. And so that's the thing when people say that they don't think that they have enough stories to be able to tell, or nobody's interested in their story, they're really selling themselves short, because stories can be extremely powerful and we really have virtually an endless well of them. And when people, it was funny, when we were talking, okay, well, what story do they want to know? Do they want to know the story of like my first sales job? Do they want to know the story of my first sales letter? Do they want to know the first story of my, falling in love? Do they want to know the journey of getting in shape? I mean, there's all these different stories. So what you got to do is kind of work backwards of, okay, here's the point that I want to get across. So what story can I tell that will make that point for me? And that's one of the magical things of stories, is that when we're talking about sales copy and we're talking about content, ultimately we want people to come to a conclusion. And there's two ways they can come to the conclusion. We can tell them what conclusion to come to, or they can come to that conclusion on their own. We lead them there with the story. The second way, them coming to a conclusion on their own in a sales situation, is much more powerful, because the desire for what you have to sell, if they come to the conclusion themselves, that desire comes from within rather than without. So they, in short, they think it's their idea. That's when you tell people stuff like you told me the story today of, you tell them real quick what happened with what you were doing and the book, and people asking about the book and how that got led up. It was their idea to want to know what book they should buy.
Right. Well, I started off a podcast, or I guess a Facebook Live and an Instagram Live. I did them side by side. So I was hitting both of them all at once, and I didn't really have a whole lot to talk about. So I looked at my desk, and I have a lot of products, and I have a couple services that I really like to use in my training. And so I did a whole thing on shout outs. So I shouted out, vitamins. I shouted out hemp oil. I shouted out my sore and tired magnesium rub, you name it, protein powder, whatever. And then people started asking questions, and they started talking about the different books. And then one guy said, what would you say your best book is, that you have? And I have, a couple dozen of them. And so I named these 3 books: Tactical Fitness, Tactical Strength, Tactical Mobility. They're my latest ones I've done, and they're just really good combo, all 3 together. And next thing I know, wham, 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 it was like all these like sales were coming through, just, within 5 minutes of each other. And obviously they were watching the show.
Yes.
which I was like, damn, that's really cool.
Money.
And didn't even mean to. And then I did a separate post of all the things that I shouted out, and I tagged all the products that I talked about, in the Instagram post. It's my latest one today. And so now I can see that they're tagging and coming from the Instagram page, to the store. So it's something that came out of nothing. So that is a story of today.
Right.
But I think everybody wants to kind of hear your journey, Jim. And I did something similar, after that guy, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of who asked the question in the group. But I did something kind of similar. Right. And I think one of the rules of when you do tell a story that is going to be understood by your audience.
Right.
Like if I told a story about me being 40 and in pain, when I work out and I use this and, whatever to help with that, when nothing but 17 and 18-year-olds are listening to me, they're just going to tune it out. So right. I did a story the other day on.
You're not 40 anymore, Stu. You're 50.
That's true. Yeah. So over 40. Right. So, I took a picture downstairs or down on the pool deck at the Naval Academy where I coach. I was coaching a group of kids that are all going special ops, and there's a set of windows up there that tours go through. And I remember taking that tour when I was 17 years old. Right. And I took a picture from the vantage point of the pool deck looking at those windows. And I made a comment when I was 17 years old. I looked down at this pool and I said, man, I really want to come here. This is my dream. And then that dream turned into actually getting to go there as a student, which turned into a nightmare because I wasn't prepared and got my ass handed to me, figured it out, wound up graduating.
Stu failed his first PT test at the Naval Academy.
I did. Things just fell apart. It was awful. And then, got to serve and do Navy SEAL training and, full circle. Now I'm on the pool deck looking up at the window and I'm coaching these kids that want to serve, and is like living a dream come true. So it all was like kind of focused on the dream, and you never really stop dreaming. You just keep evolving right. and coming up with new things. And that was my story. Right.
Let me tell you something real quick. I don't want to lose this real quick, but I want to share with you guys how Stu basically just shared the classic hero's journey. And I want you guys to understand what's going on here. All right. This is a good story. Okay. Here I am, and this is me. All right. I don't know. It's just life's okay. It's not too high, not too low. Then something happens. There's a decision. There's an encounter. There is something happens, and you decide, or there's an event. Something happens, and you go out into the unknown. All right. And immediately there's a problem. There's some sort of a problem. There's some sort of conflict. Okay. At this point, you think, okay, it can't really get any worse. But then the bottom falls out. All right. This is where the bottom falls out. And there's a come to Jesus moment. I'm sure when in all these fancy books where they teach story writing and stuff, they call it something else, but it's the come to Jesus moment, all right? Or the come to Allah, or whoever you choose to, come to Santa, don't matter. At this point, there's a revelation. There's some sort of revelation, and we're going to apply this to Stu's thing, and then I'm going to tell a story. So, and from that revelation, there is the transformation. Then there's the return home. And then there's the ascension to a different level. Okay, now I'm going to tell Stu's story telling this. I was a 17-year-old power lifter in high school who thought running 100 yards was anything over 100 yards was long distance. I took a tour of the Naval Academy And I knew I didn't want to put my parents into debt for my college education. And I decided that I was going to go to the Naval Academy if at all possible, because I was inspired on a tour where I looked out on this pool deck and I said, you know what, I really want to go to school here. So I worked my butt off and I was able to get an appointment to the Naval Academy. The problem was I wasn't ready physically to be able to do what they needed me to do there. And I failed my first PT test. And I'm sitting there on this field with all these guys and gals around me, wondering if I had made a huge mistake and if I was ever going to be able to make it through 4 years. So I decided to get some education, to get some help, and I started working on my physical ability. I joined the rugby team. I started working on my long distance running. I got tougher mentally. And then eventually I had a dream that I could actually become a Navy SEAL. And I was actually able to do that. Then, after 4 years in the Navy SEALs, I was invited to come back and run the remedial PT program at the Naval Academy to help these kids. And I found my true calling, which was helping young people get ready for military service and special operations, because my superpower is helping other people to get into shape because I love it so much. And now I'm living my dream of training all these kids at the Naval Academy. And the other day I was standing on the pool deck looking up at those windows and thinking to myself how far I'd come and how many kids I'd help to live the same dream that I dreamed so many years ago. Dude, now that's like a freaking movie right there.
Nice work.
You got a good story, right?
You said it better than I did.
You got to admit that I know your story as well as you do.
You know it very well. Yes.
But here's the thing, but by using this pattern, I was able to fill in the blanks in a sequence that made an already cool story even cooler, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So you don't need to read 20 freaking books about the hero's journey or have a minor in comparative literature in order to understand that this is the pattern that a great story follows. And so I'm going to share with you guys. So I interrupted you. Go ahead and finish your thoughts, but I wanted to just share that and show that when you have the right pattern, you can take a good story and make it amazing when you have all the elements in it.
No, that was really good. No, I don't have anything else to add to it. I was just going to kind of differentiate, what stories are again, and just say, that, well, the thing is like what we're about to hear is kind of your transformation story.
From
right?
what?
From when you got the idea of like, I think I can do this online. Right.
Okay.
It, like kind of take you from, a little bit of your foundation of like, this is where I was, before the internet, then the internet came on and this is where I am now, type of thing. And, that journey.
Okay. Do you want me to show the little outline as we go through it, or
20-year journey? No, just talk to us here.
Okay. Well, I'm going to refer to this because, I want to show you something else that I did that I know you're kind of into this kind of thing too. You see this $100 bill up here?
Yes.
That's a reminder to me that anytime I ever make a video or any type of anything and I come over to this whiteboard, I better make whatever I show worth at least $100. Every video I make, somebody should say that was worth $100 to me or more. So that's a reminder that whatever I do, I better be creating and providing value.
I like that.
It's a little reminder. So
that's a good one.
Okay, so basically, here's my story in a nutshell. I'll do the best I can. I actually, when I graduated from college, I got a degree in history. And what do you do with a degree in history? You either go to law school or you become a teacher. Well, I majored in fraternity, beer, and chasing girls. So I wasn't going to law school. And originally I was planning on going into the military, but then all the budget cuts from Graham Rudman back in the late 90s, it was impossible to get in unless you were in a service academy or some other stuff. Yeah. It was really hard to get in as an officer. Yep. So I just kind of abandoned that dream. And so if you're not going to be a teacher, not going to be a lawyer, what do? You go sell stuff on 100% commission. So I quit or got fired from 7 different sales jobs in the first 18 months I got out of school. and it was hell.
Mm.
But it was also the best training ground ever because I had to learn how to support myself on 100% commission sales jobs with no money, no savings, nowhere to live, everything. It absolutely sucked. But I learned how to sell. And I was working for Nutrisystem at the time. We were, and I was assistant manager of 2 different centers. This is back when Nutrisystem was in strip malls like Jenny
Right.
Craig.
Yep.
And so my job was to sell mostly women into weight loss, a very expensive weight loss program. And I was really good at it because I learned real fast that if you can make people emotional, they will buy. And in this case, the emotion you wanted to elicit from somebody was to get them to cry. If you could get them to cry over the fact that they were overweight, they were going to hand you the credit card.
Oof.
Now, that may sound manipulative, but it was the truth. And if you believed in what you were selling, if you believed that the best thing for them to do was to lose that weight, then you wanted to make them cry because it was in their best interest to come into that uncomfortable place and get past that threshold. So one day I sold this lady who said to me, you know what, you'd be really good in my business. I said, well, you know, ma'am, I've been in pretty much every business from selling. I even sold grave plots. I mean, I sold insurance. I sold annuities. I sold trunked radios. I sold cell phones. I sold grave plots. I sold furniture. I sold weight loss. And she said, you know, I'm in the mortgage business. I said, well, what's that all about? And she explained to me that it was 100% commit. I always thought bankers had bankers' hours and bankers' salaries. And she explained to me that the mortgage business is 100%, or at the time was 100% commission. And you were basically out there selling money. I thought to myself, okay, cool, I'll sell money. So I actually was really, really, really good in the mortgage business. The way most people did the business was they ran around and kissed ass to realtors and tried to get them to refer people. That was a good old boy business, a good old girl business. It took a long time to break into that. At the time, the rates were going down, and it was one of those refinance booms. So what I did, and I've never understood why people go to college and learn all these things and then never use them in real life. I majoring in history. I got real good at doing research. And so what I did was I went down to the courthouse in all the counties in the area where I was living, and I researched all the VA loans because they would actually publish the rate in the documents that were recorded at the courthouse. I found all these people who had VA loans that were 9.5% or higher. Woo. Then I went and I looked them up in the phone book, and I called them on the phone. I came up with a script. I had a sales script. It was like, hi, my name is Jim Edwards. I'm with Beachfed Mortgage. I was down at the courthouse doing some research the other day. I see that you have a 9.5% mortgage, and I think I could save you. And I had this little chart, which I knew what their original mortgage balance was, and I knew the thing. And so I had this little chart I had made, so I could say, I think I could save you at least $400 or $500 a month on your mortgage. Would you be interested in knowing more? And I was crushing it. I mean, I went from down here on the sales board to being the #1 producer in the office overnight.
Nice.
And I wouldn't tell anybody what I was doing. I wouldn't tell anybody what I was doing. And really quickly, I went from hustling pizzas for Domino's, which I was always doing part-time. I went to making 6 figures a year. I was 23 years old. I was making over $100,000 a year. I was driving an Acura that was paid for. I had my own house. I mean, I was also smoking 2 packs a day and drinking tons of coffee, and I weighed about 135 pounds because I was going on nothing but caffeine and cigarettes. But that was when I learned about direct marketing. I learned about everything kind of came together, making an offer. I also learned with the real estate agents how to use content to make friends with people and stay on people's radar, because other people, when they walked around to the real estate offices, they would show up with what was called a rate sheet, where basically they just had mortgage rates every day of what the rates and points were. Well, I thought that was boring as crap. So what I started doing was, on my rate sheet, I started having, like, you remember Calvin and Hobbes?
Oh yeah.
I used to Xerox the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip on there, or The Far Side, or I'd write a little 200-word article about what was going on in the market. And all these people started reading my rate sheet like a newsletter instead of being just a rate sheet. So I started making friends with all these real estate agents. But I also figured out that my niche, I'm just being real with you guys. My niche was women over 55 who would look at me like the kind of kid that they wanted to date their daughter. And so I targeted women over 55 who would look at me like I was the son they would have liked to have had. And I treated them like they wish their own kid would treat them. And these women just loved me, and I loved them too. I mean, don't get me wrong. In fact, one of them, when I broke up with my girlfriend, and I was still, this is before I bought my house, and I was looking for somewhere to live, she actually rented me a room in her house for $300 a month. And unbeknownst to me, that included food.
Nice.
I mean, she fed me.
Oh,
and I mean, I was like her kid.
That's awesome.
And so, but I figured out, you know, the audience, and not in a way that was manipulative, but just like these are my peeps. I'm going to take care of these ladies.
Yeah.
So anyway, the mortgage business though was really, really stressful. I met Terry, I met my wife, and I was just, it was just too much. I mean, I had a couple of panic attacks, and it was not good. It was real bad, in fact.
Yeah.
This is about the time I started developing my heart problem. So I decided that I was going to become a real estate agent. I figured, you know, they're making good money. So I became a realtor. I was, at the time, I decided I was going to write a book. So I had written a book. Actually, it took me 4 years to write the book. I was going to publish the book, couldn't get it published. I published it myself. I said, you know what? What if I called up all these for sale by owners? I'd written a book on how to sell your house yourself. What if I call all these for sale by owners, and I just I offer them a copy of my book? You know, hey, if this helps you, I could use a testimonial, because I was trying to get a publisher. And if it doesn't, if you can't get your home sold, if I can help you, let me know. Long story short, my first year in real estate, I took 51 listings.
Damn.
51 listings I took my first year in real estate with zero spend on ads. I spent nothing on ads. The only ads that got run were the ads that the company ran in the newspaper, but they were all ads for me, because I had all the listings.
Yeah.
So that was something I don't really talk about, but I spent zero on advertising. So I was doing pretty well, but it was, again, I was just not happy. And then in 1997, I went to homecoming, and I ran into a guy, a fraternity brother of mine. I'm going to be real honest. I was not really friends with him. He was actually one of those dudes. I was like, you know, we're in the fraternity, but if we weren't in the same fraternity, I probably never would have talked to him. And so for whatever reason, I was talking to him, and he told me he and his dad had just bought a web server. Now they owned and I guess they still own, I don't know, owned a advertising agency in New Jersey. And they had bought a web server because they wanted to start selling web ads. And I said, hey, do you think I could, I don't know what made me ask this, because I didn't even really understand how the internet worked. To be honest with you, I really didn't. I said, do you think I could sell my book on the internet? And he said, I don't see why not. So that launched me, long story short, that launched me on the idea of, hey, I need to start selling my book. And so I learned how to make a website. I went through 3 different iterations. I used some Microsoft program, I can't remember, Microsoft Publisher, which was a piece of crap. Then I used something else, and it was another piece of crap. And then somebody said, you need to use Microsoft Front Page. And so I learned Microsoft Front Page from the Microsoft Front Page Bible. Remember those big blue books you'd go down to Borders and buy? They had the big computer section.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's Bible. PageMaker 97 Bible. And so I read that book, learned how to make a website in PageMaker, launched this 20-page website, and nothing happened. I said, okay, I got to have some traffic. So I learned how to do search engine promotion, and started driving traffic through the search engines. Remember Alta Vista and Excite?
Web crawler.
Yeah, web crawler, Excite. Yahoo wasn't even Netscape, right? So all these different things, I started getting some traffic, and we started making a few sales. I said, okay. So I remember Terry and I were driving down the road one day and I said, and I remember this, I said, Terry, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how, but I know that if we're ever going to get rich, it's going to be because of this internet thing. And I need to figure this out. So again, just kind of fast forward a little bit, I decided to start a web design company with a fraternity brother of mine. It failed miserably. I developed a heart condition as a result of all the stress I'd been under for so many years. Found out later there's a family history, but it's exacerbated by 2 packs a day and tons of drinking of liquor and no exercise or any of that.
Yeah,
So
do it.
Ended up bankrupt, living in a trailer park. And I went to work for a company. I had all these skills. I mean, and it was weird. You look at one side of the story and it's like amazing. And the other side, it's like, damn, you're like a crackhead living in a shack. But I also managed to become a syndicated newspaper columnist in that time. I started in 1998. I started writing a column called The Net Reporter, which is a whole nother story. It's amazing how I got that gig. But that's not, it's probably too much detail right now. But the bottom line was I went to work for a company that did search engine promotion. And because of I knew that world. I mean, I could promote to the search engines like crazy. I just didn't I didn't understand direct sales all that well. And I knew how to sell over the phone. I knew how to sell. I had the credibility of being a newspaper columnist. And so, but my self-worth was in the toilet so badly that I actually went to work for this company for $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month was what I had gone from that shit hot mortgage broker making, $10,000 a month to making $1,500 a month and living in a trailer park. But this is where everything kind of hit warp speed, because I went to work for this company and I said, we need some sort of a product to sell, because they were world famous for getting people great placement in Yahoo. And so I said, we need to create something that we can sell. And so this is back in the days of Video Professor. You remember Video Professor? Mm-hmm. Okay, they advertised on TV. The bottom line was nobody had high-speed internet. And so the only way that you could do training videos on computer stuff was to either burn them to CD-ROM or to VHS. Nobody had DVDs back in 2001. Yeah. Right. So what I did was I figured out how to create a course on CD. This is the course that we created. It's called the Search Engine Directory Promotion Basic Applications, How to Generate Serious Targeted Traffic to Your Website. And I mean, we manufactured all of this by hand. This is a CD-ROM with a paper label on it that we pressed on there ourselves. You can even see the burn. And so what happened was I had to figure it out. So in short order, I figured out how to write a sales letter. We went to a conference. We got invited to speak at a conference in Boulder, Colorado. My boss couldn't speak, so he had me talk. And I met a guy, his name was Marlon Sanders, and he was talking about one-page sales letters. I didn't know anything about this, but I watched him explain how you could take a website and turn it into a one-page sales letter and force people to make a decision. So that night at the hotel, I went and converted my 20-page website to a one-page sales letter, and sales went up 250% overnight. So I took what I learned from that and I wrote the sales letter for this and got it up to the point where in 3 months, I was making this guy $100,000 a month in CD sales. And then he fired me. And at the time, it was June. I'll never forget. It was June of 2001. I got fired from my job because he was getting pissed because people were seeing me. His name was Jim also. So people would call into the office and ask for Jim. And he's like, oh, hey, this is Jim. No. Other Jim. The one on the CD. And that torqued him off. And then I'll be honest, I was not as good at being a team player as he wanted me to be, but my wings were starting to spread, man. I mean, I wasn't just going to be the behind the scenes guy. And so he came up with a reason to fire me. Terry and I had just moved out of the trailer into a little 1,200 square foot house that we hadn't even made the first house payment on. Fired me. So, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not done yet.
So
take us to when it all turned around.
So when it all turned around was I actually got fired, and I'm thinking this through. I got fired on my way home in rush hour traffic on Interstate 64. And this is back in the days when you didn't have unlimited talk. So I was paying 36 cents a minute to get fired over the phone. So I made it quick. There were a couple F-bombs dropped, but I didn't give a shit. And so I got home and I told Terry what happened. She said, well, you got to look at it this way. You're making that guy $100,000 a month. If you could make 1/4 of that for us over the next year, we'll be better off than we've been in years. But you got 30 days to do it, or you're going to have to go get a job at Lowe's. And she just pulled Lowe's out of her ass. I mean, you have to go get a job at Lowe's or something. And then some really interesting things happened. And this lets you know that there really is a universe at work. I had a lady that I had, a real estate agent I'd done some work for, who called me. I'd actually made her website. And this is no shit. Within 2 hours of when I got home, she called me and said, hey, Jim, my assistant just quit. I need somebody to run my computer for me, do competitive market analysis, all this other stuff. Do you know anybody? And I thought to myself, well, I just might. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come to work for you, but it'll be under these circumstances. You got to pay me $25 an hour, and I can only work for you 4 hours a day. I'll work for you from 1 to 5, Monday through Friday. I was thinking she'd tell me no. And she said, okay, when can you start? I said, Monday. All right, cool. So within 2 hours, I more than replaced my income because I was now making $2,000 a month. Plus, I had freed up my time because instead of working for him and having this huge long commute of an hour each way, I had a 15-minute commute. And so what I did was I started getting up at 4 a.m. I worked from 4 a.m. until 12 for myself. Nice. And I'd take a shower and go to work for her from 1 to 5. And then I'd come home and usually work from like 6 to 8.
Nice.
So that was the one thing. So I covered my short term, and I was still making money off my real estate book. So that was making me money. And then I had another guy that I had met at that conference that I'd emailed I'd emailed him and said, hey man, use this email now. Cause, I got fired from my job. And he called me at like 9 o'clock at night. He's like, dude, congratulations. What?
Yeah, I love that. I love to hear that.
He says, congratulations. The universe just finally kicked you out of the nest. What the hell are you talking about, man? Yeah. He said, you're ready for this. This is your Independence Day. And we talked for a while and I was telling him what I was working on. He said, well, we ought to do a project together. Long story short, we sat down and I'd been doing this. I'd just been doing it for other people.
Right.
And so we outlined this book that became 33 Days to Online Profits, which was a big time classic back in the day, back in 2000, from 2001, 2004, everybody had that book. And we ended up, within 3 months, we had it done. We got it launched. We came up with a video version of it based on what I learned from this. We turned it into a video thing. And, I also wrote a book with a guy named Joe Vitale called The 7-Day Ebook, How to Write and Publish Your Own Ebook in as little as 7 days, based on what I'd been doing for years with my books. Long story short, that year, between September and December, I made $400,000.
Damn.
Which was grossed. I grossed $400,000 in sales. Okay. Which was, my net was way more than I had made the previous 4 years combined.
Sure.
So my point in all of this, and the numbers may be a little off because maybe 400 was the next year. And I mean, shit, this is 18 years ago. So
I know, isn't that awesome?
Maybe it was 200,000. The next year was 400,000. I don't know. Your results may vary. This is not an income claim. These are for illustration purposes only. How about that? But over the course of the next year, just building on what I learned, I was able to, the very next year, make enough money right at the end of the year to pay off the house. So I was able to pay off my house in 18 months by creating a course that was a bunch of CDs with stuff. and went on to do coaching programs and membership sites and other things like that. And then to today, where, you know, I got in, I'm basically, I'm a software developer now. And,
Right.
you know, we incorporated software and tools and everything. And I'm able to help others now moving forward with that 22 years of experience now doing this. You know this, we learn principles along the way that, yeah, the names might change. You may call it Facebook now instead of other stuff, but it still comes down to knowing the principles of creating value and adding value to people's lives, building relationships, coming out with content, coming out with products. And, you know, there's other stuff that happened in between, doing cruises. We've been able to go all over the world. We do the Gym Boat Cruise. You know, I've spoken on multiple continents recently, and it's fun to do new stuff. Like last month, I spoke at Funnel Hacking Live. They had 4,500. I never did hear an exact count, but it was between 4,500 and 5,000 people in the room when I ran out on stage in a blow-up unicorn suit.
Pretty classic entrance.
There's, for me, yeah. So not many people could pull that off.
It's
but
good. It's good.
I would just say that we're really blessed. But the best thing is that by the nature of the internet and the fact that things change, we're never going to run out of cool stuff to do. And with the attitude of trying to help people, I really see myself as becoming like the grandpa of digital marketing. I'm like the guy that people go to that when they can't talk to anybody else, they can talk to grandpa. Grandpa is able to give them cool advice. And I am a real grandpa in real life too, so I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that's the guy. I want to be the venerable elder statesman of digital marketing, internet marketing, publishing. And so I'm fashioning myself as that, which means I'm a nice guy and I'll help you with stuff. But don't piss me off because the old man can still take you out.
Yeah, I love it.
So that's my story.
That's a classic one. But, you know, like you said, it goes along the same outline as you showed us at the beginning of this video. You know, you had an idea and everything falls apart.
Everything goes to shit. And then it really goes to shit.
Bottoms out.
And then, you know, you have a revelation, and then there's the transformation, and then you kind of return home changed, and then you ascend to a different level.
It's funny, you know, in physiology, that is the actual growth chart of training.
Really?
Yeah.
I believe that.
It goes the exact same way because, you know, you start training and, you know, everything hurts and there's pain and you start doubting yourself, and then eventually, boop, then on the backside of it, it's growth.
Then it hurts worse and you need a knee replacement.
Just that's how we grow.
There you
go.
Right
there. That's a growth chart.
So that, I mean, the cool thing, just to kind of wrap everything up, what we've talked about, you, again, think about what conclusion you want somebody to come to based on what you want them to do in the sales cycle or in the let's call it the influence cycle, wherever you are. And then what you got to do is just find a story in your own inventory that you can model, or that you can mold to draw people to that conclusion.
To that audience, and that audience will, you know, depending on what your audience is, that story will change.
Yes, audience specific. Yeah. I mean, you can, and when you start creating, one of the things that we've started doing is creating a story inventory. We actually have a Google spreadsheet, a Google Doc spreadsheet that my whole team has access to. And as we think of stories from my life, from my business, from stuff, we put it in there so that we have an inventory of stories that we can draw on. Yeah. Which is a cool thing. And you have tons of stories. I mean, the other thing you need to understand is that you can tell stories from your own personal experience. You can also tell stories as an observer of others and other events.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people will tell the story. For example, everybody can tell you the story of where they were on 9/11, at least everybody in the U.S. or anybody in the Western world that's an ally of the United States. can tell you where they were on September 11th, what was going through their head, who they were with, what kind of TV they were watching on. I mean, where they can do it.
Yeah.
So you can tell stories of observing other people. You can tell stories that you pull from history and whatnot. You can even pull stories from fiction. One of the stories that a ton of people draw from is Stu's favorite movie, which is Rocky. I don't know if that's your favorite movie, but it's one of your favorite movies.
It's a good one.
You know, I can tell a story real quick of Rocky 2, not the actual movie, but when I went to see it. A lot of people don't know this, but as a child, I was very, very sickly. For 4 years, I had a form of cancer, and I had my cheek cut off, my face twice, had the entire sinus lining on the left side of my face pulled out, almost lost my eye because of a staph infection. And my parents I spent months in the hospital, months and months. My parents used to spring me from the hospital every once in a while, even for an afternoon, just to get me out of there, to have some semblance of sanity.
Nice.
And so my parents took me to see Rocky 2. I hadn't seen Rocky, but they took me to see Rocky 2. And I'm this little wasted away kid. I was like 4'10". I weighed 65 pounds. And I was just skin and bones. I looked like a little, people would have wanted to make UNICEF donations because of me. And I remember sitting in that movie theater, watching that fight and looking up, and I was literally going like this. And I'm going to get emotional about it. I don't want to, but I remember visualizing that I was going to fight that same way inside my body against the things that were attacking me.
I love it.
And I mean, it's just that if I've ever been low, like really low, I will go and just fast forward to the final fight scene in Rocky 2, not Rocky.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck that. He lost. I want the one where he won. Okay.
Yeah. Him coming back was a classic.
Right. And he comes back and he won. And that's a hell of a story to tell about Rocky that has nothing to do with the story of Rocky. So, I mean, there are stories everywhere. You just, the biggest thing, and Stu said this, is you got to make sure it's relevant to your audience. The reason people say that story sucked or that story dragged was not because, well, for two reasons. All right. Two reasons why people would say the story sucked or it dragged. All right. It's got to be relevant. I hope I spelled that right. And it's also got to follow the pattern, because that means there's going to have a point. Okay. And the point of it is over here. When I say the point, the moral, okay, the point or the moral that makes sense. Your audience it's got to make sense to them. You got to follow this pattern to walk them through it. And the point or moral, A, has to be there, and B, has to make sense for your audience. I'll tell you one other thing real quick. I was last year, not this year, but last year, I was at Funnel Hacking Live, and there was a guy there telling a story. And it was a very, very, very emotional story about his wife who had and is still struggling with Lyme disease. And it was a very, very, very powerful story. But the problem was at least in my mind, there was no moral. And it was obvious that the guy was in a lot of pain. It was obvious that this was an emotional story. It was obvious, all of this. But through, I'm sure, no fault of his own, because he was like in the middle of dealing with all this stuff, but the moral wasn't as clear as it needed to be. So everybody got into this heightened emotional state, but there was no conclusion. There was no moral. There was no just a feeling of at least completion or why.
Right.
And you got to have that, because you can get people all worked up and then you don't finish them off, and everybody's just kind of left looking at each other like, what the hell just happened? Instead of with the right conclusion, with the right moral, with the right drawing it together, they could have raised $1 million for research for Lyme disease if he'd been, hey, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure that it's relevant, that it follows the pattern, and that it's got a point or a moral that drives people on to the next step.
Yeah, it almost has to have a little victory or solution, or even
resolution.
or even just a moment of contentment. Right now, I have found my calling.
Right.
Something like that. It's got to finish with, something in that genre.
Right.
To be effective. You're right.
Exactly. I think next time, next time or in the future, I'd like for us to talk specifically about origin stories and how you can find different origin stories for different stuff. Everybody thinks that your origin story has to be like rags to riches or something. And an origin story can be as simple as what you talked about today at the very beginning, with you being in a situation where you were just giving shout outs for stuff. And then you realized by getting people to ask questions and then tying it to your book, you were able to make a bunch of sales. And It was in that moment that you realized that that's an origin story. If you were to go forward and why you're teaching people to do that, or why you're doing things a certain way, it's the origin of why we're doing what we're doing. It doesn't have to start when you were in high school. It doesn't have to start, at the site of a roadside accident or something.
Yeah.
It's simply just,
it could be what you did today.
Right. It's really what an origin story. It's a why. It's a why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
Everybody wants to know the answer to the reason why. So we can talk about that in the future. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So I think we have taken our listeners' time.
No, we haven't. We have given them a valuable gift worth at least $100, and they should feel damn good that we deigned to do it. How about that?
We appreciate their time.
Yes, we do. We appreciate them being wise enough to spend their time with us. And those of you that aren't members of the Sales, Copywriting, and Content Marketing Hacks group on Facebook need to be.
Check it out.
If you want to know more about my story, head over to thejimedwardsmethod.com. And if you want to know more about Stu's story, they should go to
StuSmithFitness.com.
That's right.
Yep.
And there you go. All right, cool. Great job, Stu. Next time I'll let you talk.
Sounds good, Jim. We'll see you later.